housekeeping, and then we'll jump right in. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. I'm really excited for this conversation. We'll get into why I'm extra excited today. um, Moad's building is still closed due to the mandatory shelter in place, but you can still get your fill of art and artists of the African diaspora. Every Wednesday at 1 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time, join Moad staff. It's usually myself or Elena Gross, as we visit some of our favorite artists in their studios to see what they're currently working on and how their work is changing as a result of the quarantine. This is a rare opportunity to hear from artists directly from their studios. We follow each of these talks with an audience Q&A. So if you're joining us on Zoom, please enter questions into the Zoom panel that you'll see at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to those in the last 10 to 15 minutes. If you're joining us on Facebook, you can also enter your questions, and Sade is on the ready to pass those questions to me, and we'll be sure to get to those as well. Please visit our website to see which artists we have coming up. You can also go back and watch all of our past talks on Moad's YouTube channel and also on Facebook. This series was made possible by generous donations by the Westridge Foundation, Art Bridges Foundation, Moad members, and viewers like all of you. And thank you so much for your continued support for this programming. I'm going to read a few statements before I get into introducing Sophia. So Moad stands in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. We honor and mourn the senseless murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Tony McDade, and Breonna Taylor, whose death still sits heavily upon our hearts following the recent verdict. We also mourn so many others who have lost their lives at the hands of police brutality and racial injustice, including those whose names we do not know. We also want to stand in solidarity with the global movement to end SARS in Nigeria. And if you haven't heard of it, it's the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, or it's also been known under several names. And we mourn the deaths of the at least 12 peaceful protesters who were confirmed by Amnesty International this morning to have been killed at the hands of Nigeria's army and police force just yesterday. We also want to acknowledge our land. So as many of us are settlers, immigrants, or descendants of those forcefully brought to this continent, our institutions were founded upon exclusions and erasures of the indigenous peoples whose lands we are located. It is with deep respect that Moad acknowledges that even in the virtual space, our people, our work, and our network servers are all on native lands. And we thank the indigenous peoples of the Bay Area who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. Sophia, I want to introduce you, and I'm so excited to. Again, I'm going to get into why I'm just a little extra excited. So Sophia-Yemisi Adeyemo-Ross's portraits are love letters. Her work references photographs taken by missionary societies in West Africa at the start of the 20th century. These organizations were key players in the European economic and industrial efforts that used Christianity to obscure the exploitative practices of colonialism. However, Adeyemo-Ross is not seeking to center instances of cultural oppression, but rather to express reverence and love for those who lived through the attempted erasures of African traditions. Grounded by the Yoruba interlace motif, a visual symbol that represents interconnectedness between this world and the ancestral realm, Adeyemo-Ross's collages portraits of individuals from archival photographs onto imagined grounds. From sweeping strokes of watercolor to acrylic paint on paper, she composes timeless and pensive landscapes in which figures reside safely away from the traumas of this world, both past and present. Sophia-Yemisi Adeyemo-Ross has been an artist in residence at Lazuli Residency in Corinth, Vermont, and the New York Academy of Art. Her work has been exhibited at the Manetti Shrem Museum of Art in Davis, California, and featured in The Second Head, an exhibition curated by Armina Mussa at Office and Gallery in Los Angeles, California. She will receive her BFA in painting from the Rhode Island School of Design in the spring of 2021. Sophia, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me here.
I am beyond excited to have you here. And I just have to say, this is really a homecoming Sophia served as an education department intern at MOAD 2 summers ago. Right? Was it 2 years ago?
Was last summer.
Was it last summer? My sense of time is so messed up right now.
Wow.
And yeah, and so Sophia would come in and she had a sketchbook, and she would always, when a lunch break would come, I guess on your commute into the office, you were always sketching. And, being able to see your art, I was just blown away. And I remain blown away and impressed by the work that you do. And I was telling folks, I was like, yeah, I think we're catching a star just before her meteoric rise. uh, so I felt especially blessed to be able to have this opportunity to share this space with you today and to find out what you've been up to since last summer.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I feel a familial connection with you. So this should be calm. But yeah, I miss MOAD. I miss that green screen gallery you got behind you.
Oh, you caught my optical illusion here.
Changes every week.
It does change. You're paying attention. Yeah. I want to know, you've been in school, and what impact has being in quarantine, on one hand. So I think we're really dealing with two global pandemics. So there's the health pandemic, but there's also Black Lives Matter. And when you were an intern, Black Lives Matter was still this really underground. People talked about it, people had signs on their windows, but now Black Lives Matter has entered the center of not only the conversations here in the United States, but on a global scale. And as an artist who's very sensitive and thinking particularly about the African diaspora and your work, how is that having any impact on the work that you create? I know the quarantine probably impacts where you work, but
yeah, so we're gonna just dive right in.
Just jump right in.
Just jump right in. Well, yeah, so I also want to do a land acknowledgement. I'm in Providence, Rhode Island, which is occupied Narragansett land. Yeah, I think when, last summer when I was working at MOAD, I feel like Black Lives Matter definitely was, it was on my mind because I think those first kind of uprisings were going on when I was in high school, and they were kind of, I think they definitely built my consciousness around race. Like, watching the Trayvon trial when I was 14 was like my first kind of exposure to like having these conversations about racial profiling in this country. And I think now, like, this summer, it was a lot. And I think one of the things that I'm thinking about now that came up over the summer was how, the police in this country derived from slave catchers. And how, like, now what we're seeing in Nigeria, the police in Nigeria, they derive from colonial regimes that were like overseeing and applying colonial law. And I think that there's a global interconnectedness in terms of anti-Blackness and neo-colonialism that we're seeing right now. And I don't know how it's going to affect the work. Like this everything that's going on in Nigeria right now, especially like how we see that LGBTQ plus folks in Nigeria are specifically targeted. I feel like the work has to kind of pause because there's just so much to think about, and what it all means, especially as someone who's working from images of the past and how to utilize the past as a kind of, as more of a revolutionary agent. Like, I don't want to be in the realm of nostalgia, So yeah, there's so much to think about right now.
Yeah, I've been talking to a lot of artists lately, not only through this show, which we are now artist number 25 in the series, but I've also been talking to other artists on other platforms, and I think there's kind of a universal I think a lot of people at the beginning took some time to pause. You know, you had to refigure out your life. A lot of folks were displaced from their studios, and just the weight and the burden of everything going on was just so intense all at the same time. I've heard kind of an overwhelming response from artists lately that this is now the time for action, and this is the time where the work matters the most, you know, because artists as kind of first responders to the issues, the first ones to kind of signal that things are awry. You know, how do you see your work interfacing with that kind of a sentiment?
Yeah. Right now, I think for me, it's about material aid. And so the monetary value that the work has,
Mm-hmm.
that I think this summer was the first time I really started to try to use that as a way of combating what's going on. And I had this one, I did a portrait of Brianna, and it ended up going to, and we did like a raffle where, you know, Black folks could enter in, and then the money would go to her family.
Mm.
And I had this, I mean, it ended up being a really like empowering interaction, because the portrait ended up going to this queer woman who had been from Louisville, and she told me she like rode around in the kind of like with the EMTs, which is like what Brianna did. And so there was this kind of cyclical nature to the exchange. And then of course it yielded a monetary material aid that,
Mm-hmm.
and so I feel like it was really gratifying for both of us. She has this portrait. I was able to like give the money to the family. Like there was something about that I felt justified the work in a whole new way.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, this is the time for art and activism to like be intertwined and to take advantage of the capital that our work attracts, you know, and to use that in a way that has a tangible results. Yeah. That's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's awesome, and I've kind of heard that you've done that on a few occasions. This was not isolated.
yeah. It's a couple of times. I want
Mm-hmm.
to because I think it's really rewarding, and it feels like, I think the problem with art sometimes is it feels so abstract. Like, what are these images doing if they're just you know, sitting in, like, they can be emotional supplements, but like
Mm-hmm.
how can they function as you know, tangible action? And I think that is one really clear way that they can. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I wish more artists would do that and conceive of their work in that fashion. And I actually do think a lot of very important artists are seeing, you know, the power of the images that they create to not only beautify space and illuminate issues, but also to actively create change. I love that you're conceiving of your work as being an agent of change. Um, yeah, I want to just kind of like just jump back in and let's talk about your personal history now. And I love people's various answers to this question, and you know, so I'm always interested. What was that defining moment for you where you decided that art was your path? I mean, in a lot of ways, you are a professional artist. You're in school. You know, you're not necessarily. We already talked about this a little moment ago. You're not represented by a gallery yet. They're going to be scrambling for you soon. But you have this very active art practice. Your work is in some important collections already. And so, you know, what was your path to becoming a professional artist, and to, you know, what compelled you to go to RISD? And I guess maybe that's later in there. What was like that first moment for you?
Yeah. I think, well, so my mom taught art to elementary school kids for many years. And she's an artist in her own right. So I think there were art materials always my fingertips as a child, to the point where I don't really remember a time when I wasn't making stuff, because I think that was just really part of the home space, and always had been. But yeah, I didn't start like seriously considering art until high school, and I started with photography actually. And I kind of discovered that I had an interest, an inclination toward portraiture, and
Mm.
trying to tell stories. And I would do a lot of like conceptual self portraits, or I had like a whole setup in my room, a little tripod. I would like paint on myself, had a little timer. And it was very like, it became a way to kind of explore my own body as a kind of character,
Mhm.
vessel for different kinds of conceptual things. Um, and I really wanted to be a photographer. I thought that I was gonna like do photography, but
Not the first time I've heard that.
there's a connection there for sure.
Mhm.
But yeah, I didn't like properly start painting until uh, I was 16. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And I think, I think kind of the best thing for us to do right now is actually want to show some of your work, and then I want to talk about some of your pieces. So just give me a second to share my screen, and hopefully you're not too shocked by the first image that I'm gonna show. um, let's see.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And let me just get this all the way set up for us. My computer really wants to be slow with me today. So if you just bear with me. Yeah, and I can't see you right now, but it's okay. Can you fully see the image now?
I can.
Okay, great, great, great. So I wanted to start off with this image because it's personal to me. Full disclosure, it is part of my personal collection of Sophia's work. I get to live with this piece, but this was one of the ones that I got a chance to catch you sketching in your book, and I was like, oh my God, I'm obsessed. I love it. And can you, this is the only foray I'll go into past work for you. I know you're kind of working on a different series, but I like to start off with where your work at least was when I became introduced to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So I think in a lot of ways I'm still thinking about these things, but it obviously comes across differently now. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, a year and some ago when I was making this, I was really working with myself as a vessel, and I think that is, that played a really large role in a lot of my work up until like maybe 6 months ago, when I kind of turned away from myself as being the kind of embodiment of these different things,
Mm-hmm.
that I was trying to work with, and I think self-portraiture came about too because there's something deeply intimidating about portraying others, and implicating others in a narrative, specifically like something like this, which is like I was working with such an overt cultural narrative too. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, this piece, I was thinking about these these soapstone sculptures that were found in this place in Nigeria called SCA. They're like the soapstone sculptures of SCA, and they're like these mysterious. Nobody really knows who made them. Um, they're kind of like they're rumored to be like these intruders or invaders who were like frozen in time, and I was just interested in having a kind of fiction about them play out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, whether that's in my mind or in reality, it's like it's unclear, but.
And just because everyone doesn't know, what's your connection to Nigeria? Why does Nigeria play heavily for you?
Well, I'm half Nigerian, and I'm half German American. So I think I've always been grappling with that kind of imposed dichotomy,
Mm-hmm.
and working with a lot. I'm Yoruba, and that's Sophia-Yemisi is like my Yoruba name. And so I think I'm really drawn to kind of traditional pre-colonial Yoruba sculptures and aesthetic as a means of kind of thinking about the deep ancestral past too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And thank you for allowing me to kind of dive back, a little bit into your process and, in a different medium than what you're concentrating on right now as well. And so I will jump on to a current piece of yours, which is just also hauntingly beautiful.
This one it's called Two Boys in Gabon. Um, Alternate title, Say Something at Sunset or Simply Stand Together. Um, and I think this is a good time to just kind of talk about the subject matter that I work with and how that plays out. So as you kind of mentioned, my work references missionary photography in West Africa in the early 20th century. So
Mm-hmm.
I work directly from an archive, a digitized archive, which is called the International Missionary Photography Archive, and it's a really unique resource because I feel like, when we're talking about the soapstone and the terracotta and these kinds of ancestral remnants, today they are privatized, whether that's in
Mm-hmm.
a museum or in somebody's private collection, or question mark looted and in wherever they are today. And I think this archive, all of these images are scanned to the point where you can zoom all the way in, and it's totally free online, which is
Mm-hmm.
interesting dissemination of, of those historical moments. So yeah, that's the archive that I work from, and I think yeah. So with this piece specifically, I'm imagining these two boys in a kind of in a different context than the original photo had them. And that part of that is this Yoruba interlace motif, which you read in my article before, which is like you'll see it on those sculptures, you'll see it on beaded hats and those carved doorways, and it's these two ovals that are intersecting, and
Mm-hmm.
it has a royal connotation and a kind of divine connotation too. But what it means actually is just the interconnectedness of this world in which you and I reside and the ancestral realm, and how they are completely inseparable. And so I think that has become a way for me to kind of grapple with the aspect that these figures are frozen in time, because if we're thinking about ancestors as being ever present, then they can't be frozen. This
Mm-hmm.
one moment, and so I think I like to imagine them in a space that's timeless. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And flowers repeat in this body of work. There's always some element of flowers. And what is that? Yeah. Why these particular flowers?
Totally. Flowers are huge for me. Um, so yeah, I think to kind of start off that explanation, I'm working with this contradiction. And the contradiction is me as a kind of curator, and even like maybe sometimes I think of it as care work, looking through these
Mm-hmm.
images, which some of them are deeply painful. Um, and that is a contradiction to the kind of agency that I'm looking for in their eyes, and to portray that agency, to portray that strength, even at times joy, um,
Mm-hmm.
when the context is so deeply violent and melancholic. And so to kind of to think about that contradiction, you know, how to liberate these folks that are frozen in this specific colonial era. One of the ways I deal with that is reverence. And so for me, the flowers are a gift. The portrait itself is a gift as well, but I think placing flowers, and I've been recently placing animals as well as kind of like protectors or guardians, and the flowers are offerings of love, honestly. And I think something that I'm taking a class right now, and we're reading Zami by Audre Lorde, and
oh yeah,
great book. And you know, my professor was talking about how romanticism is inherent to the diasporic experience, which I've really been thinking about that, because there is this kind of, you know, this romantic idea of your ancestral homeland. And in the book, you know, mom uses this mortar and pestle, and to Audre, it's this beautiful, exquisite, mysterious object of, like, you know, all this mystery, and to her mom, it's just a utilitarian object that she uses to grind spices. And so I think there's this kind of romantic, and that's for me where the love letter comes in. And I think I like to embrace that romance as a way of honoring.
I love it. That's amazing. Thank you for that explanation. Let me see. I had already kind of gone into this piece. And the ocean, the seaside is a recurring motif in this body of work, or bodies of water.
Yeah.
And you know, obviously when you're thinking of diaspora, that is the point of the journey. But you know, also, and particularly, I mean, I guess not just Yoruba, but in Yoruba mysticism or spirituality, and in several spiritualities of the diaspora, it is also kind of the meeting place between the two worlds. Just like with a lot of Native American epistemologies, it's also about, you know, the sky, where the sky meets the earth. And is that something that plays out for you as to why, you know, the seashore or these bodies of water as kind of a meeting place plays so heavily?
I love this idea of meeting place too, because as the artist, I feel like I'm meeting them there as well. And I feel like I'm meeting them in the ancestral realm. And so the beach at sunset, you know, and of course, like, Nigeria is a coastal country. And I think a lot of the photographs that I work with are coastal countries. And so there is this relationship with the water. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a fluidity too, and that kind of mysterious depth. Everything you said is totally spot on too. Yeah, I think it's also thinking of serenity, and the most serene place to have folks reside. And where to meet them. So yeah.
I love it. I love it. And then also, you know, in this image, the wood really reads through. You know, you're obviously working in thin layers, and you're not trying to cover up the wood. You know, and even looks like in the bottom corner, you're exposing the wood without paint on it. Is there a significance to the wood for you?
I mean, yeah, I haven't been working with wood in a minute, but I would love to work with it again. I think, you know, it's the color of melanated skin. It comes from the earth. If I could work on terracotta, I would. I'd love to do that in the future, because I think it has such a rich material history, especially as being, you know, the medium of so many beautiful Yoruba objects, but also just across the continent. Yeah, I think it feels of the skin, And I think that's why I was drawn to it. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Do I have this on and again, we've got the flowers here, and the flowers are featuring much more prominently this time.
These are, this is two sisters in Congo. The original photo was taken in 1920. Yeah, I think at a certain point, I feel like the more flowers, the better. I think too that I want to protect them, and I want to kind of even cloak them. Yeah, to cover a body in flowers.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And can you kind of like talk about the technique for this one?
Yeah. My technique is pretty much the same for this most recent body of work. I'm working with, for the bodies themselves, the materiality is different than other aspects of the piece, the flowers in the background. But the bodies are watercolor on paper, and then I'll do like some sweeping glazes of different kind of tints and gloss mediums. And so they have a kind of depth and shine to them. And then they're collaged onto watercolor on paper. That's pretty much for most of them. I think paper has become really prevalent for me too. And there's something that feels really accessible about it. All with exception to this large work behind me, the majority of my work can be held in your hands. And that paper also has that kind of intimate, sometimes I get people saying, children's storybook even, which makes me happy because I think I'm looking for something that maintains the simplicity of the image.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Your work is for the most part intimate, though I have seen you work on an enormous scale. So and I kind of this is one that I definitely have gone back to a few times because it stops me in my tracks. It's absolutely stunning and gorgeous, and the way that you handled the frame around them with the high contrast with these flowers. And I can't quite tell what kind of flowers they are. They almost look like hibiscus to me, or some kind of a lily. I can't quite tell.
Yeah, they're hibiscus. That it's an interpretation, but yeah, I think something else that I want to mention too about these works, when you see like sculptural work, specifically like the kind of the cast iron, cast bronze heads from like Ife, Yoruba works, they were often used to honor divine folks who were in positions of power, and often the most divine were the oldest, the elders, but these renditions of them are youthful and the most handsome, chiseled, with the smooth skin, and it's really beautiful, and that kind of, it's called ephebism, or like the kind of capturing them in the prime of their existence and their most beautiful state is a way of honoring them and their internal energy. And that's too, and I think it's why I gravitate towards images of younger people too, because I think there's something about capturing that beauty that is part of the offering. Yeah.
And what about their clothing? It feels very Western, and it feels a little bit more like it's the middle of the last century than the beginning of it.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think part of you know, the contradiction that I was talking about earlier, the melancholic and the agency is acknowledging those Western moments, specifically like the pearls too. These kinds of glimpses into their, you know, material reality, and then allowing them to step away from that too. So the dresses are my interpretation of kind of these Western style meadowy dresses that they had on.
I love it, and you know, you spoke just a moment ago about covering them in flowers, and so by putting them in these flowery dresses and inserting the flowers on top of the figure, you're literally covering them. It's absolutely stunning. And then I would want to remind folks to please put your questions in the Q&A. We'll get to them in a few minutes. Also, if you're on Facebook, do that as well. And today we'll bring it over. We're going to get through a few more pieces, and this one's a very different style as well.
This is a young woman on the grounds of a hospital in southeastern Nigeria, circa 1930. I don't have approximate dates for these, and I mean, it's just something.
And that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's okay, because again, I am working with this kind of timeless realm. But yeah, this is just a drawing. I think something that I haven't touched on here is the kind of Art Nouveau aesthetic that I have a relationship with. And that, again, I mentioned earlier, so I'm half German American. So I think as a part of the practice for me is pulling from that kind of European aesthetic archive, and using it as a means of ornamenting or even serving. I'm looking for a kind of hierarchy and between those two, and using it in a way that it wouldn't traditionally be used at the time. You know what I'm saying? And it's, again, I think it's something that I'm still working through, because those kinds of aesthetics are so dear to me, and I kind of want to give them like to the folks in these photographs. And I think I'm still thinking through how, in the most effective way to do that. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it does remind me, you know, it also reminds me of photography from that day. So, you know, particularly if you look at tintypes and everyone is standing in front of essentially kind of these same staged backgrounds, and you know, sitting on some kind of a prop because you had to stay still, but there are always elegant props, you know, that they're in front of, and sometimes they're in these garden scenes. And you know, you talked about first being really interested in photography, and so, you know, I wonder if any of that, you know, maybe if it's even subconscious, is in the back of your head of, you know, there weren't a lot of Black people who were able to afford to go into a studio or even allowed to go into a studio at the time. So, you know, the few that we have are very rare and precious, but you know, everyone's dressing in their Sunday best. You know, sometimes the men are in top hats and the women are in these flowy dresses with all the jewelry that they, you know, that they owned on or sometimes borrowed. And I wonder if any of that, you know, that sense of giving dignity to the figure and elevating them from maybe what their station was at the time. Does any of that play into your thinking and treatment of the characters and the surroundings you place them in?
I think that's spot on. I think the elevation in the act of honoring them and adorning, you know, the ornamental aspect has a total relationship to the flowers and the florals as well. Yeah, I think something about the original images too is that oftentimes they were used as this voyeuristic apparatus, you know, and sent back to Europe to be viewed and consumed. And so, yeah, I think in closing the photograph in as much flower as possible, as much flora, as much elegance, as much agency and strength as possible is super important to me. And again, trying to navigate that contradiction. And ultimately, I think for me at this stage, I consider it between me and the individual who I'm drawing, as and I pretty much, I always imagine giving it to them, because I think that kind of reaction would be like, you want them to be like, this is so beautiful, thank you so much, you know. And so I think for me, that's really that's at the heart of my intention. Yeah.
And again, this is a drawing. So is this graphite and colored pencil that I'm looking at?
Colored pencil on paper, and I did like a watercolor wash over it when I was done, like a yellow.
Wow. Okay, so I thought this was a print the first time I saw it. I did not realize this is you
Yeah.
meticulously, especially with the flowers in the background.
Yeah.
So there's an intensity to the labor behind the work, and also I don't even want to ask you how many hours this took you, but I can imagine the hours. So there's also a love and a reverence in just the amount of time and attention you're giving to this piece.
Absolutely. I think that's really important. Yeah.
I think we have time for maybe one more before I start looking at the questions, or maybe two. Maybe I can sneak two in here. And this is the image that we used on the cover for this piece. And I think our marketing department and public programs staff also loved this image, and it spoke the most to them. And I also would say that I think with your work, there appears to be some sort of a narrative. However, as a viewer, that narrative is not obvious for us. I have to ask myself what's going on, and really, and I think that's the magic of your work, is that now it's the kind of a piece that I can really live with, because the story changes for me depending on what's going on in my own world, what's going on in the larger world, and I can't quite read, and I want to know if is that intentional, that you're not providing us with a very simple narrative. And this piece for me also just feels it's like a dream. I almost feel like I somehow am a guest inside of your head while you're sleeping in this very lucid, vivid dream.
Yeah, I think this was made quite a while ago, and I think I definitely was working more narratively in terms of maybe imposing my own narrative a bit with the way that I arranged these two figures. And thinking, I think I was projecting on this one in the sense of looking for my own story in their story. And I think this kind of idea of a lucid dream has so much to do with an ancestral realm, because we can't envision it, we can't live in it, so it resides purely in dream and imagination and imaginational space. Yeah, and I think it's not for even me to say, really. I think that's kind of the beauty of these things, is that folks can project their own kind of understanding or experience onto them.
That's amazing, and I'm just really drawn by the regal way that the person in the front, or it looks like a young boy to me, just the way that he's holding his body. There's a pride in this, and I don't even know that they're necessarily interacting with each other in this. It's almost like he's walking past.
I love that read.
And I'm also noticing you've got this motif that I'm starting to notice in each image of the moon or the sun, and it's often a crescent moon. Does that have a significance for you?
Absolutely. The moon is dear to my heart. I did a while back, I was really, really interested in this Yoruba folktale about the moon. It's called The Generous Moon. And when I was a kid, my dad would always read like this book of oral Yoruba folk tales, and there's all, they explain everything. Why do mosquitoes bite you? Why is the sky far away? But there's one about the moon and how she comes down and she gives her meat and lets people eat from her, and then she becomes skinny, and that's the story of the waning moon.
Wow.
So generous that she gives her body away and becomes like this sliver in the sky. And just the idea of her as this nourishing, overly generous body is something that really stays with me. And I love to kind of pay homage to that when I place her in things, maybe even in the sense that she nourished the individuals in the image, and that's why it's such a crescent.
Oh my gosh, I've never heard that story. Thank you so much for sharing that. I love it. I absolutely love that. And let's see, I think this will be the last image we go to. I know you sent me one other, but again, we have the figures returning. They're in a body of water right now. And I almost feel like I can imagine where this body of water is. And there's a part of me that feels like I've been there, though I probably haven't.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. This one, I mean, I know we're running low on time. This is kind of taking a different path because I began working very recently from these postcards, and so like having them. I actually have this one right here, which I've framed, but
Nice.
like I discovered on eBay that you can just buy these ethnographic postcards that are post-stamped like 1900, and I had a moment where I felt the need to buy as many as possible because it made me so deeply uncomfortable that they were just floating out in the ether. And these objects these are real photographs too. They're not prints. Legitimate photographs with the gloss and everything. So yeah, for me, the laying the postcard down with the flowers, I did a kind of altar and painted from that, as well as the last image, which, you know, whether or not we have time to talk about.
Okay. Yeah, I think we can jump to that one as well.
Yeah. It's this one was also from a postcard, and so again, this act of kind of even just taking them off the market, I consider to be a part of the practice too, because, and any Black folks out there who want to buy these and take them off the market and care for them and honor them, I really encourage you to, because I don't think that they should just be floating around eBay. These are deeply, deeply intimate objects. So yeah, for me, working from these was a kind of protecting, reclaiming type thing, and giving them quite literal flowers. I had it set up in my studio.
Wow. Wow, that's phenomenal. Yeah, I didn't know that story, and I love that you're protecting the image and taking it out of, you know, consumption, and that's almost like giving back to, you know, the folks in the photograph, and now you're giving them a new life and a new story and a new reverence. Well, maybe not a new story, maybe illuminating the one that they already had, that they weren't able to tell for themselves.
Really?
Yeah, I'm gonna see. It looks like we do have questions in the Q&A, and lots of chats. I unfortunately was not able to see those earlier, so I definitely want to be able to get into some of these. So Nadia Wolf wants to know, from what archives are you sourcing your images? And I think you started to go into some of that, but you did reference some of the earlier Congo images from Congo. Also, do you have thoughts on representing images of family in Nigeria versus images of people you do not have a direct familial relationship with?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a direct familial relationship with any of the individuals that I paint. Not to say that I don't feel it deeply in my heart. Um, I honestly would love to work from images of my own family archive, and I actually just asked my dad if he would send me some, because I think the my initial draw to these images was because I didn't have access to those, and I felt a familial connection to them, and a really strong love and desire to paint them. So yeah, I think that answers.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. That's awesome. I can't wait to see those images. And yeah, I think there is really something to investigating the archive, especially when you're someone who is in diaspora and may not know your entire, family history, and it's almost like connecting the dots. And I think, your approach is something that Deborah Willis talks about of, how she also goes into archives and she tries to give these new stories, for the people who ended up in the archive, which is often not cared for by people that look like the people in the photographs. Um, oh my gosh, I love it. So Janet, Janet, I'm sorry, Amu, I think is your last name, says, hello, my name is Janet. She's a 16-year-old half Ghanaian visual artist from the Chicagoland area. From your experience as an artist of the African diaspora, how do I develop my own relationship with my Ghanaian culture in order to explore those topics in my own artwork? Oh, I
Wow.
love this question.
Yeah, wow. Well, I mean, I think, and this is how I went about it. I think I started with myself as like the most immediate connection to my own diaspora is my own self. And so, I mean, I think it's an interesting way to kind of begin investigating how you feel that within your own body, and the folks around you as well, and their own stories. I'm thinking about those. That's so exciting. I hope you keep making art.
And Janet, we want to see your work. um, and Debbie Ratchliff wants to know. She's curious about the scale of the works. What are the sizes that you work with? Yeah, especially the ones I showed. We can't quite tell.
Totally. Like I said, so the one that you can see behind me, that is like the largest thing in my most recent body of work. I would say most of the work is somewhere between 12 by 18 and 20 by 24. So, but we're talking, if you're in a gallery space, there's probably only one person in front of each work. And I think that's really intentional for me, because that kind of close one-to-one connection with the work is really important.
I totally agree. And I think that, you're a little ahead of your time with that as well, in the current COVID era that we're in. People are going to need to stand apart from each other when they're in galleries. I don't know if they're doing it now. I've heard otherwise, but, I think when you're intimate like that, it really does give the space for one person, to be there. And then, um, oh, we have another one. So Janet's brother Nicholas also has a question for you. He is an 18-year-old musician and poet currently attending Brown University. He is inspired by your artwork that vividly captures the beauty of continental Africa as well as the African diaspora. What advice will you give to young artists who want to use their voices and talents to speak up against the inequalities and injustices in this country?
What's his name?
Nicholas.
Nicholas, send me a DM on Instagram. We're neighbors. We could socially distance, have a conversation in the park or something. Brown University is right around the corner. But yeah, I think I think it comes down to what you just communicated, having that kind of passion and having that deep feeling that something needs to be said. With music too, I think you have a really unique ability to sit with people, to sit in their ears, and to kind of marinate in people. That art, once you walk away, you've walked away, but with music you can really sit with that. And I think it's a really unique art form. But I would just encourage you to keep exploring those kinds of things that it sounds like you're already thinking about. Hit me up on Instagram. I'd love to talk to you.
I love that we have so many young visitors with us. And I also want to just share, we have people on both the Zoom and also on Facebook who are just saying how much they love your work. They're so excited about it. It's thrilling, it's gorgeous, it's beautiful. And we have also Jennifer Strickland, who is joining us from Facebook, who says she loves this. She arrived late to the discussion. And she's wondering, can you repeat, like, are the photos from the missionary societies, that are they from archives, libraries, et cetera? Like, what is the source material for them?
So they're from the International Missionary Photography Archive, which is a digitized archive, free online. You can literally just Google it, and you have thousands of images, not just West Africa, but all these different countries that were colonized during the early 20th century. And I'll warn you, like, a lot of them are difficult to look at, but it's a really unique reference in terms of, like I was saying earlier, a lot of our histories are privatized. So I think that having that kind of access, if it's something that you're interested in, to see those images of real people, they're totally free. So International Missionary Photography Archive.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that resource, Sophia. And I kind of have another question that I think will also go into kind of my question. So I think Jennifer is wondering if you're going to have an exhibition catalog coming out soon, and maybe we need to have an exhibition of your work at the museum so we can produce a catalog in order for that. But I mean, I guess for me, that it kind of flows into what's next for you. Do you have upcoming exhibitions that you want to tell us about, or shows or projects? Where can we see you and your work next?
Well, I'm still in school. I'm freshly 21 years old. So I'm really just focusing on, building my practice and thinking through what it is I want to do for the next year. I don't foresee galleries right now. I'm mostly looking at residencies because I think that's kind of the way that I foresee thinking through and expanding on what I'm already doing. So if you want to keep up with me, just be on my Instagram. I'll let you know if there is something. But for now, it's quiet. I put out work, I love to share work because it whether it's in a gallery or if it's online, it's more accessible even it's online. So it's just important for me to share what I'm doing and share what I'm thinking about at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would definitely encourage folks, if you're on Instagram, to check out her Instagram account, because that's where I get to see what you're working on. And I'm always like, oh my gosh, this is beautiful, must have it. And for folks who are interested in acquiring your work, which I feel like there's a lot, when might they be released?
I don't know, Dimitri.
Pressure.
Hold on to things right now. I'm young. I want to hold on to things unless I'm using it as a tool to raise money. That's why if you are interested in acquiring something, when things are, for sale, they're for a cause which makes it more worth your while. So I've been making a lot of woodblock prints recently, which I feel like are, already woodblock has a deeply political history. And I think that feels like a really good way to, send money to folks that need it right now. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, I've been holding on to my work right now, like a lot of my paintings, because I think I'm still young and it's important for me to make sure I keep them.
I totally hear that, and you have to remind me that you're 21. I imagine you much older. I think the way that you carry yourself, also the way that you think about the world, and that you're investigating these issues. I always think that you're at least in your late 20s. 21-year-olds are supposed to be thinking about these kinds of things. I love it. I love it. And I do want to ask one more question before we close out. But who are your mentors, and who are the artists that you most look up to?
Yeah. Yes. Well, I have the honor to go to the school that Jennifer Packer teaches at, so I would consider her a huge mentor, conceptually and aesthetically. But also, I feel like recently I look at Billy Zangewa a lot, who's a South African artist who makes these beautiful figurative silk tapestries, hand stitched. They're so thoughtful and lovely and about self-love, radical self-love. As a Black woman, I think Njideka Akunyili Crosby, someone, obviously these kind of families, Nigerian diaspora, kind of combining Western and Nigerian spaces into this amalgamated space is something that I totally think about. But I think those are top 3 for me.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm. I love it. I love it. Do you ever imagine yourself? You mentioned Billy, and I've heard you talk about her work on a few occasions. Have you thought about working with fabric in any kind of way?
I really I've actually tried, and I don't know how to do it without conjuring Billy so much.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's just a copy at that point. So I feel like she has pinpointed such a beautiful and unique way to portray melanated skin through fabric. And I'm not sure that it's my turf. It may be something, I'll keep my options open in the future. Maybe something to think about, because I do love that work so much. It's so, yeah.
Yeah, she is incredible. And as well as Njideka and Jennifer as well, just amazing, amazing artists. And you are so fortunate to have Jennifer Packer as a mentor. I'm jealous. Well, this has been really beautiful. Thank you so much. Of course, I could talk to you forever, and I hope that we get to catch up again really soon. This has been really wonderful, and I cannot wait to see what you do next. Someone slid something into the Q&A real quick. We see Maya just wants to tell you that your work is brilliant, and thank you so much, Maya. I agree.
Oh, thank you, Maya.
Absolutely brilliant. And thank you so much. I just want to remind folks that this conversation will be, you'll be able to review it. If you missed the beginning of it, you'll be able to see it on our Facebook as soon as we end. You can go all the way to the beginning. And by Friday, this will be on YouTube along with the rest of our past 24, now this is number 25, presentations of In the Artist Studio. Please go to our calendar at moadsf.org to see the list of artists that we have coming up. So we've already scheduled all the way through the end of the calendar year. And we hope to see you guys at these for every other program. And again, Sophia, thank you so much. Have a beautiful day. And this has been awesome. Blessings to you.
Thank you.
All right, I'll see you very, very soon. Bye, everyone. Take care.